Ashley Heidemann from JD Advising. Before we dive into our video, let me give you some background on our completely free law school prep course. You can find a link below and sign up to access it right away. And if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe to our channel. As of this taping, we have literally thousands of students enrolled in this free law school prep course. We're also very grateful that students rated this course an average of 4.76 out of 5. This course is posted as a free resource on the Law School Admission Council, or LSAC's website, and was just mentioned last month by U.S. News & World Report and the National Jurist as being a helpful law school resource. It has also been promoted by the National Black Law Students Association, Phi Alpha Delta, and various law schools and undergraduate institutions across the country.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rachel Margevich, and I am the Director of Pre-Law Services at JD Advising. In this video, I'll be chatting with 3 of our amazing JD Advising Law School and Bar Prep tutors to learn more about how tutoring can help law students, when students might be able to benefit the most from a tutor, and more. To start, I'd love to have each of our tutors introduce themselves and share a little bit about the work they do at JD Advising.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel, and thanks for the invite to doing this event. Really appreciate it. So I kind of have a non-traditional background for legal background. My undergrad and grad were in engineering, and I did a lot of research in underwater acoustics. And then at one point, I kind of had a choice to go into subcontracting with the Navy or get into patents. And I kind of flipped a coin, ended up in patents. As I was working in patents, one of my mentors said, "Hey, go to law school. We're going to pay for it." So I had a really great opportunity, went to law school, finished, took the DC bar, took the California bar. And it was a really great experience. I had a lot of fun. I'm one of those people that will say law school is a lot of fun if you make it fun. So it was a really great experience. I've been with JD Advising for about 2.5, 3 years. I do a lot of tutoring for the UBE, the Uniform Bar Exam, the California Bar, law students, as well as the MPRE, which is the ethics exam.
Yes, hello, and yes, thank you for having me. My name is Brittany Thomas, and I'm, of course, a tutor with JD Advising. I went to law school at the University of Miami and then took the UBE in New York in 2018. And I've been tutoring with JD Advising just about a year, so not for too long, but I've got to do a few of the bar administrations, so now 3 UBE bar administrations. In addition, I've tutored law students in various different subjects and tutored many students, as Nino said, in the professional ethics exam.
My name is Heather Buck. I'm a course instructor and tutor at JD Advising. I attended Wayne State Law School in Detroit, Michigan, where I finished in the top 10% of my class. I have been working at JD Advising for a little bit over 5 years. This is actually my full-time job at JD Advising, so this is what I do 100% of the time. But prior to working for JD Advising, I did many different things in the legal field. I clerked for a few different judges. I worked at a mid-sized law firm. I also worked at a mortgage company in their corporate counsel office. So I have a lot of experience in the practical field as well. I've been with JD Advising, as I said, for about 5 years, and I have been tutoring for law school, the MPRE, which is the Multi-State Professional Responsibility Test, the Uniform Bar Exam, and the California Bar Exam. And I have tutored law school students in so many different subjects, all of the first-year subjects, family law, administrative law, secured transactions, corporations. So I have a really wide experience with tutoring with JD Advising.
Thank you so much. Now let's dive in. My first question is for Brittany. Brittany, when is a good time to start working with a tutor? When should students who might be thinking of getting a tutor actually reach out?
Thanks, Rachel. That's a great question. Well, what I'll tell you is definitely don't come seek a tutor when it's too late. So a lot of students get behind and then think, okay, this is the time where I should get a tutor. When in reality, you should be thinking about having a tutor for your classes at the beginning of the semester. And so what you should be doing is as soon as you have an issue and as soon as you think that something's coming up, be looking for a tutor. And it's good even, you can look at JD Advising's tutors and maybe reach out to us so that as soon as you need one, you can have a tutor available to you. But my best advice is to start it as early as possible in the semester because you do not want to be in a position of playing catch up. The readings keep coming. And so look for a tutor as soon as, and probably even before an issue arises for you.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you, Brittany. And it leads to my next question, which is for Heather. Heather, when a student starts working with a tutor, what kind of concerns do they typically have?
When students come to us early, as Brittany was mentioning, I think a lot of them are nervous about like preparing for class, especially being on call, which can be super nerve wracking as you're starting law school. It's something that you probably didn't experience too much in undergrad. And so I've had a lot of students who just want help with preparing for class so that if they are called on, they know how to appropriately respond, they know what they're talking about, kind of. I also get students who sign up early because they just want to get a jump on things, which is awesome. They want to start outlining, they want to start thinking about their exams, which is so important because in your first year of law school, especially, your entire grade is based on one final exam. And so it's so helpful to start working on how to prepare for that exam really early in the semester. So the earlier, as Brittany said, they come, the easier it is for us to really set them up for success early and put them on the right track. So we can do things like start to create a study schedule, talk about how to structure your time so that you're really appropriately preparing for class, but then at the same time also thinking about exams and doing what's going to ultimately help you get a really good grade on that final exam.
Thank you so much, Heather. As you said, exams are so important in law school, and for most students, the final exam dictates their entire grade for the class. So, Ninos, how do you and our other tutors help students prepare for their exams?
Thank you for that question, Rachel. And as Heather and Brittany both said, final exams are the key component to your 1L grades and even your 2L and 3L grades. So you really want to focus on studying and learning the material that's going to be tested early in the semester. The whole point of first year law school exams is to test whether you can spot issues, whether you know the law, and whether you can analyze the facts. So in order to do that, you don't have to look like a star when you get cold called. You don't have to memorize cases for homework. What you have to do is you have to start practicing for the exam. And the best way to practice for the exam is using either your professor's practice exams that they gave to you, because usually a professor will have 1 to 2, maybe more old exams. And that's the best metric for what an exam would look like from that professor. And also, you can get other practice exams from other areas. You can just go on to a different website, a different law school, and look for that particular topic. Say you're looking at torts and look at the release torts exams, and you can use those as practice. So what we do at JD Advising, and what I do in particular, is usually I'll ask the students to bring any of their practice exams that they have. So that's the first thing. Second thing is we look at their syllabus and we really focus on what's going to be tested. So you have to know what you're going to be tested on from the beginning of the semester so that once you get to the end, you have everything understood and you've done a lot of practice. And then ultimately, what we do is we design a nice schedule to where we get the student to understand each set of materials in a chunking fashion. So they'll learn piece by piece and just keep building on their knowledge. And as they're doing this, we throw in practice questions for those particular chunks. So if we're in torts, we're doing something like negligence, we'll have some sessions on understanding what negligence is, understanding the rules. And then what we'll do is we'll take practice questions and we'll go over them so that when the student sees this on the final exam, they'll be able to say, hey, I've seen something like this before. I understand how to attack it. And what they do is they'll take that knowledge, apply it to a different set of facts, and hopefully end up doing pretty well on the exams. So that's a big part of it. Any confusing topics that a student might have, we go over in the sessions. So if someone comes to us and, during a session like, hey, I was just in class, we were going over negligence per se, I don't quite understand it, we'll kind of step back a little bit, look at it from a high level, and then kind of jump into the weeds of it to give the student a better understanding on how to attack those situations. And then ultimately what I like to do is once you go over the information, you always practice it because that's how you retain the information. So I think the 3 things: focus on the final exam early on, use practice exams, use supplemental materials. We have a lot of a lot of outlines that we use with the tutoring, and they're great outlines. They give the information very succinctly. And then the third thing would be really understand the concepts step by step and just keep practicing throughout the semester. And that's how people end up doing well in the final exams.
Thanks, Ninos. Other than exams, Heather, what are some things that you can help law students with in these tutoring sessions?
Well, I also emphasize the importance of the final exam and help them make sure that they're making a study schedule that prioritizes the exam from day one. But of course, there are other things that they're going to want to do that you're going to be doing throughout the semester that I definitely help students focus on. One thing in particular that I get a lot of questions about is outlining. Outlining is a foreign topic to a lot of first year law students. What is an outline? How do you make an outline? What's the point of the outline? And I think because it's such a foreign topic, a lot of students make the mistake of waiting too long to start making their outlines. So I definitely work with students who come to me early in the semester on putting together their outlines. I'll show them how I outline, I'll give them some sample outlines. One thing I really like to do is I'll have them work on their own outline after the session is over and then send it to me. And I'll take a look at it. I'll go through it. I'll make sure it makes sense. And then if we do meet again in the next session, we'll talk about it. We'll go back through it and I'll have the student explain it to make sure that they actually understand what's in the outline and they didn't just copy and paste their notes from class or copy and paste notes from the book and call it an outline, but that they actually understand the information that's contained within it, because I think that's a really great way to make sure that you actually understand the law, which is ultimately going to help get you a better grade on those exams. As I said before, I also help students prepare for being on call in class. A lot of students are often nervous. I've had students who sign up for a session just because they know they're going to be on call and they want some help preparing for whatever material is being taught in class that day, just to make sure that they understand it a little bit better. I will say, I think students are a little more nervous than they need to be about being on call. You're not typically graded for being on call, but I do understand that you don't want to look silly. You want to look like you know what you're talking about. So, at the same time that I help students prepare for being on call by going over the substantive material, I also make sure that they understand that it's probably not as big a deal as you're probably thinking it is in your head, because it's ultimately not going to matter all that much. The final exam is what's really going to matter when we're thinking about the grade that you get for that class. One other thing that I've done with a lot of students in tutoring sessions is I've done a lot of legal research and writing sessions. We can't help with graded assignments, so I won't work with a student on an actual assignment from class, but I will work with a student who's, let's say, struggling with citations and how to do legal citations. We'll kind of walk through the Blue Book together, which is the rules for citing legal documents. I'll show them how the Blue Book works. I'll do some practice exercises with them. I'll have them write like a sample writing assignment that has nothing to do with what they're doing for class. And we'll talk about different ways to make it stronger, transition sentences, introductions, conclusions, how to make legal arguments, things like that. So even though I can't help as specific with legal research and writing in terms of what you're working on in class, I can still help with the concept. So I get a lot of students who are looking for that kind of help as well.
Thanks, Heather. There are so many demands on a law student's time. So my next question is for Brittany. How do you guide students in balancing all of these things while preparing for class, working on outlines, studying for exams, and everything else that's required of law students?
Thanks, Rachel. As Heather and Enos have said, like repeatedly, a schedule is your best friend. There's so much to do in law school. So not just reading all of the cases that you get in your classes, not just outlining, and sometimes finding time to do practice exams and understand everything in your cases. You also have other obligations like clubs, different groups that you might want to join on campus, activities that might be important to you, things in the community to do, your professor's office hours, stuff with the administration that might just come up that you're required to do, things for your scholarship. And so, what I advise people to do is set up a schedule that includes every single thing that you have due. And by what I mean by that is break it up hour by hour. You have your classes. So, from 6 a.m., maybe you're going to wake up and go to the gym. From 9 a.m., you're going to have your first class until 11:15. Then you might have some time to read, maybe eat some lunch. Put everything in your schedule. If your teacher has office hours, put it in your schedule. You don't necessarily have to go, although we would recommend that you do. But have it in there so that it's a reminder for yourself that those office hours are that time. You want to make sure that all of your obligations are mapped out from the very beginning. So on your weekends, a lot of times I have students outline. And so you have your weekends blocked out for outlining and then reviewing what you learned the week prior. You can also cover readings. So put into your schedule how much and when you're going to complete different readings for every class. That is going to be your best way to ensure that you get all of this done. But also, really, I find that students spend a significant amount of time reading cases and trying to prepare for classes. And what we've said already, you don't get graded on how well you do, or generally you don't, on how well you do on a cold call, or if you really understood the case exactly how your professor wanted you to. That you're not getting graded on. But also, when you read a case, it's really hard to understand it. That's what class is for. And so because students spend so much time reading, they don't have any other time. They don't have time to outline. They probably don't have time to do what you'll find. You'll have a writing class. You'll have to write a paper for that class. That will take up a significant amount of your time. And so just a tip for you as you prepare for classes is you can cut down your reading time by breaking it into segments. And so there are these things called case briefs. And so you can literally Google a case name. Most of the cases that you are going to read, someone has covered them in some form or fashion. There are also supplements that organizations have that have little case briefs, and they break down all of the important pieces that a case has in it and basically gives you the high level overview, because a lot of times the cases don't make it that clear. So you can go into the case already prepared to know what you're supposed to take from it and immediately cut down your time. So in addition to having your schedule that lays out every single obligation that you would have, and I mean from day one until the last final you have, you can cut down your time on reading by really focusing on what you need to take away, and then letting your teacher fill in the gaps for you along the way.
That's such important advice for all law students. Earlier, Brittany mentioned that it's so important to start working with a tutor as early as possible. But I'm curious, Ninos, if there are any other red flags that students should watch out for that might tell them that they should start thinking about a tutor.
Thank you for the question, Rachel. Yes, there are definitely some red flags that if you're a student, you're in law school, and you start seeing these patterns in yourself, it may be a good time to think about, hey, I may need a tutor. Now, you may only need a tutor just to get back on track. It may be a few sessions, you get back on track, and then you just continue on through your 1L year, and you end up doing great. But there's some people that may need a little more help as we progress. So one of the major red flags that I see is people over preparing for class, over reading cases, trying to memorize cases. That's not what law school is about. Law school is not about memorization of cases. You're never going to get a professor. I won't say never. You're more than likely never going to get a professor that tests you on what was in actual case. They're never going to say, hey, what was in this case? They won't. You're going to get a hypothetical set of facts, and you're going to have to analyze that, and you're going to have to perform based on that hypothetical set of facts. So I think people that are stressed out, they kind of are saying, hey, I go to class, I read for 3 hours, and I still don't understand the cases. I still don't understand what's going on. That's one red flag to where you might think, hey, I may need some guidance, because that's what tutors do. On top of helping you learn the material, we also guide you through law school. We went through law school. We understand the process. We understand what's needed. We understand kind of how to block out the noise of what everyone's telling you should do, and also how to kind of focus on what's important. And I think a lot of the time in law school, there's a lot of kind of groupthink where we want to go along with the 90% of the people. The problem is 90% of the people can't be in the top 10% of class. You can't. It will never work. So it's always a lot better to do what you should do, and also focus on the things that are important. And I think that's one thing that a tutor would be good for. A second red flag that I see is people that occasionally you get professors that will give you a midterm, especially 1L. I think my torts professor gave us a midterm. And if you take that midterm and you look at it and you see that you underperformed from where you thought you would be or where you would like to be, that's definitely a red flag where you may think, hey, I may need a tutor. Now, usually midterms, the nice thing is usually midterms are either ungraded, you just get feedback, or they're a small percentage of your final grade. And even there may even be a caveat that even if it's 20% of your final grade, if you do so well on the final and you get an A, it may just override everything. You'll get an A for the class. So usually midterms are just kind of a gauge for you to understand, hey, do I understand this material? And not in the abstract. Do I understand this material and can I give a good analysis and write a good exam for this professor, right? It's always geared towards that professor. It's not geared towards some random person that you think is going to grade. It's actually geared towards that professor. So that's definitely a red flag. And that's it. It's not arbitrary. You'll see you take a midterm and you perform worse than you thought or worse than you want to. That's a good time to say, hey, I may need to get some guidance. I may need to talk to a tutor. I think the third main red flag that I've seen is people just being very, very lost in lectures. They're just kind of throwing their hands in the air. They're confused. They don't understand what the whole point of this is because it's the Socratic method. And if they came out of undergrad or grad school, very rarely are you doing Socratic method. It's a type of teaching that's very much geared towards law school. So people are just not used to it, and sometimes you're going to walk into class, not understand what's going on, get confused, get frustrated. Now, I would say if you're 2-3 weeks in and you start feeling that way, well, I mean, you might as well just think about a tutor at that point, because the earlier you can get back on track and the earlier you can kind of position yourself to perform well on those 1L exams, the more comfortable you're going to be. And it's actually going to make the experience a lot better and a lot more interesting, a lot more fun for you.
Thanks, Ninos. Generally speaking, Heather, are there any subjects that are more difficult for students and ones where if the student is struggling with it, they should really start reaching out about tutoring early?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I actually have seen a lot of students who in their first year of law school struggle with real property and also civil procedure. Those tend to be really difficult subjects for students during the first year. Real property has a lot of antiquated rules. They use a lot of words that you've never heard of before. They're just issues that you've never thought about or never heard of. And so it just tends to be a difficult subject for people because not only are you diving in to understand the law, but you have to try to figure out the language at the same time. And it can be very easy to become overwhelmed in that class. So I think that's one that definitely I get a lot of people looking for help with. Another one I think is civil procedure, which is the procedural rules that apply in a court setting. And first year civil procedure mostly focuses on federal courts. And a lot of students in their first year of law school they don't have any experience being in court. They've never litigated a case before. You've probably never worked in a court. You haven't seen the process that a lawsuit goes through from beginning to end. And so just seeing all the little nitpicky procedural rules and having not a lot to apply it to because you don't have a lot of familiarity with this process in the real world makes that, I think, too, a difficult subject. One other thing I'll add about civil procedure that I personally think makes it hard is you're learning these procedural rules in your first year of law school, but you're learning them in the context of cases that have some substantive issue underlying them. And you don't know the substantive law yet. So I think the civil procedure cases are especially difficult to figure out because not only are you having to figure out what these procedural rules are, you also kind of have to figure out what the heck is going on with the cases as well, to make sure you understand what the procedural rules are being applied to. As I mentioned before, though, I have tutored for every single first year subject and many second and third year subjects as well. I've seen students with questions on everything from torts to contracts to property to evidence to family law. I've worked with it all. So even though there are some subjects that might be a little bit more difficult than others, that doesn't mean that there aren't difficult concepts within some of those maybe easier subjects. Even something like torts. Torts is usually considered an easier class. Maybe it depends on who your professor is, but a lot of people tend to like it. But there are some tough concepts, like understanding the causation element of negligence can be really difficult. So even if you find that you have maybe an easy class, don't be surprised if you come across a concept or a topic in that class that ends up being a little bit more difficult that a tutor can definitely help walk you through.
That's great advice. Thank you, Heather. Brittany, what are some benefits that a tutor can provide to a student that they can't get from something like a study group or going to a professor's office hours?
Oh, that's a really good question. I actually got that from a lot of the law students who I worked with last year. Well, the main thing is, we are all of the tutors, we specialize in teaching in one-on-one settings. And so I have you by myself, and I have many different ways to teach the same subject. And so I can go over it visually. I have examples of how to do it. I can give practice questions and how you apply it in a way that might be a little different. But in a study group, let's just take the alternative. So we have a study group and then going to your professor. Study groups are often, and you will find this in your time as a law student, very unproductive. You tend to study with people who you like. So those are your friends, those are the people you've gotten kind of close to. And so you know what? You guys are going to talk about what you're doing this weekend and what the plans are. Or, or you're going to go there with this idea that you're going to be very, very, focused on one subject. And then you guys get lost and stuck on one case together. And so because somebody has a question about a subject, all of a sudden the 3 hours that you had planned out to study in a group is now spent on focusing on one question to help one person. And so you might not get the answer that you want, but also a study group, they don't always have the right answers. And so you're also studying with a group of people who might not know the subject matter because they're not versed in it, because they're your classmates. And so a tutor can provide you not only accurate information, but also help you with your particular need. And then if you go to a professor's office hours, a lot of people think the professor will be able to explain it to you or in a better way. And in reality, a lot of them do not. They know how to teach it in the way that they've been doing it for the years that they have been teaching. You'll find that a lot of your professors are tenured, they've been teaching this material for so long, but also they likely practice law. So to them, these are concrete subjects. And to you, it is in the abstract. And so it's unlikely that your teacher is going to have all of these different methods to then teach you the same subject. And so a tutor can give you an individualized answer and go over it with you until you understand it in a way that a study group or perhaps your professor, even at their office hours, would not be able to do.
Wonderful. So if a student signs up for tutoring, Ninos, what does the format of a tutoring session look like?
Thank you for that question. That's a really good question. So the formatting, it really depends on the student. Students are all individuals, as Brittany said. They're all coming with particular needs and particular areas that they need help in. It could be a particular subject, it could be a particular understanding of a particular subject, and they may not be understanding in one way, and there may be a better way for them to teach it. But generally speaking, a lot of the ways that the tutoring sessions go for law students are a student will sit in class. As an example, I'll just use torts. They sit in a class and they go over negligence. So they spend 2-3 days, four classes on negligence. And then it makes sense that they're going to have questions on it. So what they'll do is before the tutoring session, they'll send me questions. They'll say, hey, I don't really understand this. I don't understand that. Can we go over that? So that's a great thing because the student themselves are identifying where they need the help. So that's really helpful for the tutors, and it's really helpful for them because they can gauge, hey, I understand this, but I need a little bit of help over here with this part of the subject matter. So that's one way that they'll come in and they'll give us that information. So that's usually before the session. One thing I always ask for, and naturally the students will send, is the syllabus, because I myself want to get an understanding of, hey, what actually is going on in this class? Is it going to be a traditional class, traditional torts, or is it going to go in a different order? So that's good for me to kind of understand it. So I'll usually get the syllabus and I'll get questions from them before. During the session, we do a lot of substantive law, right? So that's the actual law itself, explain it, give practice questions, give different scenarios to say, hey, this is an understanding. This is what you need to know, and this is how you should understand it. And then I like to quiz people. I like to say, hey, we went over this. I think you understand it. You think you understand it. I'm going to give you some questions to see if we can really solidify it and bring it home. So that's a lot of what we do in the sessions. We go through a lot of the substantive law, we answer the questions. And then we also, as we progress, we start testing particular subjects. So in torts, you might have 6 or 7 major issues that you're going to see on an exam. And we start chunking them and doing practice tests or practice questions. And again, we can get those practice questions from the professors, old exams, or from anything like different professors' exams, or you can just get them online from other sources. Once you have that material, we can go through practice in the session. I'll share my screen, we'll go over, we'll parse out how to go through a question. That's as important as answering the question, is understanding how to read the question. Once you understand that, then we'll go through and we'll try to figure out how the best way to write an answer. And then I'll also give you feedback on a lot of the material. You may even send me, hey, I did this practice exam. Can we go over it in our session? And that's also really helpful, because when you sat there and you took a 30-minute, 40-minute, 50-minute, an hour-long practice exam or practice question, you're doing the best thing you can absolutely do to do well on the final exam as you're practicing it. I always make this analogy to students. If I told you you had to hit 10 foul shots in order to get an A in class, would you A, take foul shots, B, read a book on taking foul shots, or C, watch people take foul shots? Ultimately, the answer is actually practice taking foul shots, because that's what you're going to be tested on. So that's a lot of what I like to do in the sessions, and that's usually how the sessions go, because we gear towards what's the ultimate goal? Doing well on the final. How do we get there? Well, we practice for the final. We make sure that the student knows the material, they know the rules, they understand how to write their answers, they understand how to give strong analyses, and they also understand how to identify all the issues that they're going to need to be able to do for the exam. And everyone can do it. Everybody can do it. You just have to be able to kind of step back and look at things from a high level and then be able to execute it at a lower level. And that's hard, easier said than done sometimes, but that's what we can help you with as tutors.
That sounds great. Thank you, Ninos. My next question is for Heather. Do students usually just sign up for one session, or do you meet with students regularly? And if you meet with students regularly, what are the benefits of meeting with a tutor on a regular basis?
I've actually had both. I do get some students who just sign up for one session. Usually it's because they have very specific questions. They covered a topic in class that just didn't sit with them, or they have a very specific issue that they want to go over. It also could be that they just want to kind of try out tutoring. So they sign up for one session, and if they don't find that it's helpful, they might not sign up for more. I would say that more often than not, though, students sign up for tutoring on a regular basis. I meet with students weekly or twice a week, or every other week, whatever works with their schedule and kind of their means in terms of what they want to do with tutoring. I find a huge benefit to meeting with students on a regular basis like that, because it really gives me an opportunity to see how they're adjusting based on the advice that I've given, based on things that we've covered in terms of like how to set up their study schedule or how to prepare for class. Maybe they kind of try some things that we talked about, and then in the next session, when I see them again, we can talk about if it worked or not, talk about how things are going and adjust if necessary. I also think there's a huge benefit to meeting with students regularly just because things change throughout the semester. Concerns during the first week of class are definitely not going to be the same that concerns that students have the week before finals. The first week of class, you might be figuring out how to be on call, how to start writing an outline. Whereas during finals, you're really like hammering down the details, making sure that you understand these concepts, doing practice exams. And so meeting with students regularly really gives me a chance to talk about a lot of different things, because a tutoring session goes by really quickly. And I try to cram as much information as I can into a single session. But there's just so many different things and balls to juggle in law school that it really helps if we can kind of spread it out and tackle them as we go over them throughout the semester.
Brittany, what times do you meet with your students?
So I work a full-time job, so usually like 9 to 6 p.m. And then I have tutoring sessions basically outside of those hours. For a while, I was tutoring a student from 7 to 9 a.m. And then some in the evening, so 6 to 9:30. Some people like to go late till 10. It's also beneficial because I'll tutor people in different time zones. I'm in New York City. Sometimes I'll be tutoring people who are in California or students who are in the Midwest, so different time zones. And we have tutors like myself and Ninos and Heather are all in different places, and we all tutor students. But in addition to those of us who like work a regular job or work a separate job than JD Advising, we have tutors who work like 9 to 5. And so basically every hour of the day, I know earlier when I said set up a schedule, I said 6 a.m. because I am an early riser. And so I'll offer students time starting from 6 a.m. basically until 10 p.m., including the weekends. Most of us are available. I'm sure if you sought a tutor, there's someone available at whatever hour you would be seeking a tutor for.
Ninos, why is it so important to seek out a tutor and to do well the first year of law school?
Thank you for that question. To answer that, everyone kind of has to step back and look at themselves. They went through this process, they applied, they got into a law school. Now they're sitting there and they're saying, okay, well, what am I going to do with it? This is an opportunity. That's what law school is. Law school is the opportunity for you. It's not the end all of it, it's just the opportunity. So, in order to make it worthwhile, in my opinion, you want to do the best you can in that 1L year. You basically want to start off and you want to start off strong and you want to start off doing well, because if you do, that's going to carry on for the next 2 years. But even before that, if you do well in your 1L classes, you're going to get a great summer internship for the most part, right? You're going to be on the competitive edge of getting the best internship. Now, you might want internship A or internship B, and because you perform so well in law school for the 1L year, you're going to have a choice of either one. Now, sometimes it may be difficult to pick between two things you want, but I'd rather have more opportunities than less. So I think one important thing is those 1L grades really start your career in law off very importantly for the summer positions that you'll be applying for, and also just to set the stage for how well you're going to do in law school. And that's going to carry, how well you do in law school is going to carry to your first job, maybe your second job, and maybe further on to where you can get certain positions because you perform so well in law school. The 1L grades are very important. Secondly, 1L grades and 1L subjects are going to be tested on the bar. So you're going to see them again, right? So my background, I took a lot of patent courses in law school, 2L and 3L. That was absolutely not going to be tested on either the UVA or the California bar, and I know of no state that'll test that. No state will test that, but the 1L classes will be on it. You will see those 1L courses again and again until you get through the bars. And even then, if you go into one of those fields, those are the broadest fields that you're going to see. So it's likely you're going to be practicing maybe contracts, you're going to be practicing trial law, and then you're going to need civil procedure, you're going to need torts maybe. Those are going to be courses that are really going to be important for your performance in the legal field. So it's very important to set up 1L and do well in those first year classes. It's also important to make sure that if you're struggling, find that tutor, find that help, like as fast as you can. Whatever it is, whether it's a tutor, whether it's through your school, whatever you can do to kind of put yourself back on the track so you're doing well and you're understanding that until you take those tests at the end of your first semester, until you take those tests at the end of the second semester, everything is not lost. You can learn the material, you can practice the material, and you can outperform and you can perform well on these exams. So 1L grades are very important. They set the stage for your law school experience. If you do well 1L, I promise you life is a lot more interesting and a lot easier as you go through 2L and 3L. You get the positions you want, you get the summers you want, and then you'll probably get the career positions you want as you move forward. So they're very important. And there's that saying, once you get behind the 8 ball, it's very hard to get in front of it. And that really is true with 1L grades. That if you want to graduate highest honors, high honors, any of those really important things towards the end of law school, you really need to try to perform as best as you can in the 1L. And the thing is, You can all do it. Every student can do it. Everyone has the capability to do it. You just have to figure out the strategy of law school and kind of how to get through the noise, because there's going to be a lot of noise. It's going to come at you and it's going to try to take you off the tracks. If you can somehow stay on the tracks, then you're going to end up doing a lot better than other people in law school. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you stay on the tracks. Or if you fall off, we're going to help you get back on. And that can be with teaching you the law, teaching you what to expect, kind of being there with you as you prepare for your 1L final exams. And those are going to be very important.
Thanks, Ninos. So my last question I'll pose to all three of you. Do you have any final tips for students who are preparing to start law school? Heather, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Rachel. Yes, I have a story that I like to share with my law school students during their first year. When I was in undergrad, I knew I was going to be going to law school. So I joined all of these pre-law groups, and I had a lot of friends and activities that were geared toward people going to law school. And we had speakers, including people who were in law school at the time, come speak to our groups. And I distinctly remember these speakers coming to our groups, and they said, that you're probably used to being at the top of your class. That's why you're going to law school. You're a good student. You're very smart. You want to go to law school. You got into law school. Well, guess what? Once you get to law school, everyone came from the top of their class, and everyone wants to be in the top 20% of their class. So I heard this information, and I thought that in my first year of law school, I was just struggling to survive. I went through my first year thinking that I just needed to do enough to make sure that I didn't fail. I needed to stay in the middle of the pack. I needed to keep my head above water. I didn't realize that I was actually doing much better than I anticipated. I mentioned that I ended up graduating in the top 10% of my class. And I think that that advice that I received in undergrad actually did me a disservice, because I went into law school thinking, like I said, that I just had to survive. Had I known that it was feasible to get into the top 10%, into that top 20%, I think I would have had a different mindset. So I like to tell students, if you are willing to put the work in, if you want to be in the top 10% or top 20% of your class, it is 100% feasible. Don't listen to these people who tell you that it's an unattainable goal, because someone has to be in the top 10%, top 20%. So if you want that to be you, it can 100% be you. And I've actually had students who come to me as a tutor because they want to make sure that they are in that top percentage of their class. And I've helped them get there. I've helped them succeed. So don't just think that tutoring is for people who are struggling to get by. If you want to make sure that you are super successful, think about tutoring as well. It can definitely be something to help you get into the top of your class also.
That's great advice. Thank you, Heather. Brittany, any tips from you?
Kind of along the same lines, just a little different. I would say that don't think the same thing that made you be successful in college is going to make you successful in law school. We do a lot of things in law school. And like Heather was saying, a lot of us were the top of our class in undergrad. So you go into law school thinking, oh, I can do that. But everybody was the top of their class. And so the same thing you did in college is not necessarily going to work. And really, there is a method. It is doing your work, it is practicing these exams, and it is scheduling everything that you have to do. If you stick to what you have to do, like Heather was saying, you can do really well. It's not as if the method for doing well in law school is hidden from you. It's just not the easiest thing or the most fun thing to do. It's like I was going to make an example like to losing weight. Like we know what we're supposed to do, but I just don't want to eat the apple. Like I just don't want to eat an apple every day. I don't want to eat vegetables every day. That doesn't sound fun. I don't want to do that. Law school's like that. We know what we have to do. They tell us what to do. It's just doing it is difficult. But if you do it, it is possible. Every single one of us at JD Advising passed the bar exam and did really well in law school, even though we were surrounded with a lot of people who also did really well. It is possible. It is feasible no matter what school you're at, as long as you stick to the plan. But just don't think whatever was successful for me in undergrad is going to necessarily make me successful in law school. Stick to what the plan is, and I promise that you can be successful.
Thanks, Brittany. Ninos?
I don't even know if I can top any of those tips, but I'm gonna try to give similar type tips because those are all great tips. I'm gonna try to give 4 tips and then one piece of investment advice, which isn't really investment advice because it's very cheap. Um, so I would say the first thing, make it enjoyable. Enjoy law school. You worked hard to get there. You performed well in undergrad. You sat for the LSAT. You did everything you could to get into law school, and I'm sure it was stressful, and I'm sure it was hard at times. Enjoy law school because when you enjoy something, you usually end up doing better in it. I think that's my number 1 tip. Number 2 tip would be find people in your law school that are helpful. Find people that are going to be there like you, also be helpful to other people. Don't be the type of law student that's going to try to trick people so you think you have an edge over people. It's A, it's not good karma, and B, it really doesn't work at the end of the day. So I would say be as helpful as you can to other people if they need help, and that usually comes back. And usually what that'll do is you're going to surround yourself with people that are helpful, that'll challenge you, that'll be there when you're studying, when you have questions, and you'll say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" or "I didn't understand this." And you'll have kind of that resource that you can step back to. The third thing is probably the most important for law school grades is read that syllabus. You're all going to be lawyers, so read that syllabus and always focus on the part that says your final grade is going to be 100% based on your final exam for most of the core classes, with the exception of legal research and writing. That's obviously going to be a paper class. So focus on the final, focus on learning the material, looking forward, right? You're going to kind of do what Brittany said. You want to plan out everything to get to where you need to get by the end of the semester so you can ultimately perform well in the exam. Really focus on the final exam, really focus on practicing, understanding the material, and getting ready for that, because that's what you're going to be tested on. No one is going to test you on what happened on September 6th in class. That's probably not going to be tested. What's going to be tested on, here's a hypothetical, and you need to provide an analysis. So in order to do well, you have to issue spot, and you're going to learn this in law school. You have to issue spot, you have to know rules, and you have to be able to provide an analysis. Just like if you want to kind of think it out, if you have a law office and someone came to you and they said, "Hey, this is what happened to me. It's this amazing story. What happened 10 minutes ago? What should I do legally?" That's really what you're doing on an exam, is you're giving that legal advice, but luckily you can't be disbarred for giving that legal advice because it's just being graded. So it really focused on those final exams. So I think that was 3. The fourth thing, I don't even have a fourth thing, but the fourth thing I would say would just be the investment. Invest in, this is my own personal opinion, so take it with whatever amount of priority you want to. But I think the people that I've seen perform best in law school, they invested in pens, pencils, and notebooks. They weren't the people sitting there typing everything the professor was saying. They had a notebook, they sat and they listened to the professor, and they wrote down what was necessary for them to understand. That's just my opinion. I thought it helped me in law school. It's not something, I mean, ultimately, you should probably experiment with both, having a computer and also having a notebook and a pen. But my piece of advice is really think heavily about having notebooks, pencils, and pens, because that's going to help you understand the material better, going to help you remember the material better, and it's ultimately going to, I think, help you perform better on the final exam.
Thank you so much to all 3 of you for sharing your insights with our audience. We hope it was helpful to all of you who are watching, and we wish you the best of luck in law school.